Well, architecture is the art of building. If building is a simple craft of erecting structures in different climate, soils, and altitudes, with different materials in different climatic conditions, which created what we know as vernacular architecture, popular architecture, and so on. Yet every culture around the world who has been building has also evolved beyond the pure craft, the tectonic, let's say, the engineering, putting together of materials, of something which needs to be more beautiful, because vernaculars around the world are beautiful, but something more to scale, not just with the person or the family or the tribe or the people who build it, but with their symbolic community. And those buildings tend to be bigger than for a family. And therefore, when you take a vernacular building which consists of stone or brick or mud or wood, and you blow it into kind of a larger scale for a large group of people, it would be crude and also become illegible. And that is why the classical architecture, whether it's in South America or in China or in Qatar or in France, is a language, is what is rhetoric in speech to speech, that you have not only to cultivate the music of the voice in order to be more elegant, more comprehensible beyond the valley or the hamlet where you speak, but comprehensible to a wider group. And that, by being louder, and also combined with poetry, becomes an art form. And it is that art form which speaks to community rather than the local accent of some calf somewhere in the mountains or the desert or other places. Traditional architecture is building, making structures with natural building materials. And it is using natural building materials which create a tectonic, a constructive tradition where an error is self-destructive. Whereas with synthetic materials, which are liquid materials, whether it's steel or plastics or concrete, you can cast them in any shape, and you can even lie them on the back and they still survive. So these liquid materials don't teach us how to build, whereas the brick, the Louis Kahn is famous for saying that a brick wants to be an arch. Taught men how to make arches and how to make walls which are solid and so on. The interesting thing about architecture is by blowing up a simple stable to 10 times bigger or 50 times bigger, it would be unbelievably crude and impossible to do with the natural materials, because vernacular building is defined by the size what a hand can hold, what the brick is defined by, or stone is by what one or two people can carry. And large public buildings, they do not only want to be made of brick, but of something grander. Independent of society, whether it's communist, imperial monarchy or republican, you had that will in all countries until 1945, basically 1953 in Soviet Union. And the mystery is why this system broke down. For me, is incomprehensible, because around the world, classical architecture and even vernacular building, that is what intrigues me. Why is vernacular building beautiful everywhere? It's simple beauty, but there is no philosophic or temperamental contradiction between peasant building and monarchical castles or palaces, because the prince admires the simplicity of the stable, and the peasant loves the beauty of, when he has camera, takes a picture not of the stable but of the palace. And so there is this common language around the world which was incredibly well established, that the beauty of structure unifies mankind. And when Tamerlane, when the Mongols invaded Uzbekistan, I think it was, they killed by hand 200,000 people in a few days. The only people saved were the craftsmen, because they were the agents of beauty, and they would, no, the enemy was respected when he produced beauty. A community of self-interests getting together because they can't live otherwise. They need each other. And the city has urban self-interest, which is strongly related to the country, which have self-interest, and each need each other. I mean, the peasants need the city, and the city needs the peasants to, to eat. And if this is not done in harmony and in local arrangement, it's taken over by world government in the end, I mean, in the very long run. And we know James Kunstler, he became famous 40 years ago, writing an essay called the 1,000-mile cheeseburger, or something like this. No, Caesar salad. Because he said, where does this come from? So you can't have a salad without spending tons of petrol. Whereas the first thing which worked again in Russia after everything collapsed in 1990 was local markets. You grow salad, you have the experience, you can have beautiful salad grown right across in the field next door or in the park. The European community have in 70 years of different European central communities in Brussels, Luxembourg and Strasbourg, they built garbage buildings. They're no more than building materials put together in a shoddy way. Europe is not respected. I think Brexit happened because there's not a single building of Europe which could symbolize what Europe is really. It was a community not only of interesting people, but particularly there is something between Stockholm and Rome and Paris and Spain and Isfahan, which is common to humankind, is building cities, making beautiful cities, which allow us to admire the Persians and the Persians to admire us. It has been, no, it's the basis of tourism. So that we do something, because we all as humans, we admire natures, whether it's desert or jungle or forest. We are made to admire beauty. And if you build ugliness, people suffer horrible torture, but they don't dare to think. No, they don't dare to express their pain. Traditional ways of building were based on experience, and experience comes by correcting accidents. It was a long tradition, which is accompanied by knowledge, experience, and judgment. And the craftsman had to have the same matrix of values than the architect, otherwise they couldn't build. So in the past, let's say 1810, an architect, I saw examples in Bordeaux, fantastic building, 3 drawings for a fantastic building, because the craftsman knew how to interpret these drawings into solid fabric. And that is now the architects even have to tell you where to put the pipe, and they are responsible in 10 years if something goes wrong. The architects have become poor slaves of these ridiculous administrations. And that is what needs to be reformed, because instead of building 1 town, I could have designed 200 towns. It takes about, you saw how quickly we do a master plan that will be modified, but the basic structure, if you have the experience, you can design a beautiful town in no time. Yes, when the Prince of Wales made his speech, he made the architects feel responsible for what they were doing. because when they did ugly buildings, they excuse it with the idea that it's functional, it's contemporary, it's modern, it's innovative, and all this, they are bullshit arguments. If people don't like them, it's not the people who are wrong, it's the architect who is wrong. And the architects are responsible before God and the devil and history, or whatever they call the absolute. They are responsible for having destroyed architecture, and particularly architecture education. Now, I think architecture and town planning, urbanism, is one of the most fascinating jobs which exist in the world. I mean, it's compared to music, writing music. It's incredibly interesting to create places which people will feel all right. It's fascinating, because with the line you decide how people live, good or bad, whether they live in a camp or in a beautiful town. It's a matter of design. And that is what is so important, that architectural education doesn't teach architecture. It depresses young people, destroys their souls for 5 years, and then I don't know what they do. But I hear always this, whereas when you are taught real architecture, you discover your talent and your skill, and you can flourish. You don't stop. It's like playing the piano. You don't stop because you are 65. I'm now 77. No, I'll do it to the end. People, if they don't like some of the garbage which is now being built, have to excuse themselves that they are not expert. Whereas architecture, like music, you don't need expert. You are moved, whether you like it or not. And sometimes, I remember I detested English music before I lived in England. And suddenly somebody took me to a concert of Elgar, which I thought was, because German philosophers thought very poorly of English music. So Elgar. Then I went to the concert, and they played a piece called Enigma Variations, and I broke out in tears. Bloody hell, I mean, this is great music. And it's not just a copy of Brahms. This is a great musician. I agreed to myself that I was wrong, because I was moved. And that is the thing. Architects who do beautiful buildings, they can no longer be admired because they don't agree with the general system. But people like these buildings without being told. I always was fascinated by Chinese architecture or Iranian architecture. Now I discover Qatar architecture because it's a universal language. It speaks to the eye, to proportion, and also to the heart. It doesn't need translation. Whereas even the most beautiful rhetoric poetry, spoken poetry, if you don't understand it, you may enjoy the rhythm and the cadence and the importance of message, but you don't understand the fine. This was an art which was also very important in diplomacy, good manners. Good architecture is good manners in building. Diplomacy was good manners in treating with the other, or with the enemy, or with the people you detest, but you behave like a real, well-educated person. And this system has strangely broken down. God knows why. And particularly in an age where we think we are more advanced than other countries, than other periods of time. Now with mathematics and science and rockets and fast cars, we think we have really progressed humanity to a stage where the before was, what did he say, Mr. Borrell, that Europe is the garden and the rest is the jungle. He has never looked at the jungle. The jungle is a place of very high order, where God's interference is still active every day without being destroyed by human hand. Through modernism, architecture became ideologized and an idiotic, sort of kind of an infantile conception of progress, because we have advanced more. We cannot go back. But then if you have that, you cannot speak, because grammar, experience, everything is of the past. So we are not cut from the past. And without that going always back to the past, you cannot communicate, you cannot build properly, you cannot build beautifully, you can't have intelligent action. Past is not over, as somebody said. when Luxembourg was built its most beautiful extension in 1900, had become enormously rich because of steel industry, which we never saw. It was 20 kilometers away behind the hills. In the evening, the skies would go red, but we would never go there. That was the wealth of Luxembourg was being produced there. But we lived in the good, it was called the good country. Beautiful landscape, beautiful trees, beautiful villages and cities. And so that wealth built not only a very interesting political fabric, but also a great architect who became friend of the prime minister, and he commissioned the famous German master plan to do the plan for this new Plateau Bourbon, was called. And he commissioned the best architects in Paris and Cologne and wherever to do the building. And it was a fantastic new city built next to the historic town. You had the most beautiful bridge in the world, 60 meters, 65-meter radius of an arch, biggest stone bridge in the world. And that's where I grew up. So I thought, how was this possible? There was one architect, working friend of the prime minister. He commissioned architects. He would get these perfect plans from Paris. He said, okay, build it. There was no administration for building. There were virtually no regulations except a code written under Napoleon, but it had nothing to do with form. So it was 3-4 people and architects who built this beautiful city. Now we need the King of England to want to build a town, and we take 30 years to do something which could have been done in a few months without administration. A shortage of patrons and the wealth of bureaucratic parasites, because for instance, now we have fantastic architects in England, which we employ to build the new parts of Poundbury. I get these fantastic plans. I used to suffer, I have stomach aches, and teach them how to do chimneys and gates and windows. Everything seemed to be wrong. Now everything is right. I get these beautiful 100 drawings. There are no mistakes. I just make a bit here, maybe that'll be right. And they can build it. Those perfect drawings, they go to the administration, the regional administration, district administration of Dorset, and they take 2 years to give us the permit. Bureaucracy is profoundly useless. Unfortunately, democracy is a machine to produce legislation and norms and prescriptions for the good life. But in fact, they prescribe something which shouldn't be prescribed. You need moral law, but you should not prescribe people what to do, or how high your balustrade should be. In France, you call a balustrade un garde-fou, meaning you want to stop madmen from falling over a balustrade. Now there's European legislation which requires you to have balustrades 1.10 meters high. So when you sit, you have exactly the pipe or whatever they put there on your eye level so you don't see the horizon. It's legislation which is not only useless but extremely expensive to administer, stops good developments from going ahead without a hitch, and it's profoundly parasitic. Asked me about the mission. I felt I had been chosen by God, as one says, to do something about it, because there was nobody else. But there had been many people coming to the same conclusion, but they didn't have the instrument to express it. The problem with humankind is that intelligence is a fragmentary quality. Every human being is intelligent in something, but also very stupid in most other things. That is why we need each other. And that is what regulated economies and cultures, and people who were good at playing a musical instrument were not sent to the war. And people are good infantry or good generals are useless in cooking. They are needed where the battles are fought. because otherwise you lose and then you become a slave. So it's very important that we know that, thanks God, modernism had not yet taken over, it's about to take over our genome and our bodily functions. When we have children, we still have children with gifts. Gifts for language, gifts for art, gifts for military, gifts for growing things, all the good old gifts. And the common education, which has just created a common standard, has rendered people stupid. And stupid not only against the world, but stupid against their own gifts, not respecting their own gifts. And then you have people looking for their, who am I, what do I want to do? And Woody Allen made a fantastic film called Interiors, where famous businessman, he has a wife who is looking for her own personality, and he finally is fed up after an hour of this, you hear these dramas, and she's always unhappy. And he says, what do you want? Tell me what you want. And she said, I want to express something, I don't know what. And that is the result of 200 years of misguided education. Whereas people, when you have a child, you see what it's gifted for. And you have to encourage it to go in that direction and not to study mathematics when you are a fantastic pianist, because you become a bad mathematician. You need that people are again recognized for what they're good at, because otherwise they will always look for themselves and never find them. We are the same human creatures who need each other to be a collective, speak a common language, make beautiful buildings, and it is that making beauty which actually allows us to admire each other and for power to be respected.